Hello. Reading book again. Making a big deal out of it. It's kind of a big deal. I don't think I can concentrate that well. Also, kind of want to share what I'm doing in general. So, we in the previous stream, in the previous episode, we got through 2 sentences of this. Not that it's dense or anything, it's very introductory. But I was sidetracked. Most of what I have written in the last decade consists of attempts to tie in my social hopes, hopes for a global, cosmopolitan, democratic, egalitarian, classless, casteless society with my antagonism towards Platonism. These attempts have been encouraged by the thought that the same hopes and the same antagonism lay behind many of the writings of my principal philosophical hero, John Dewey. Platonism, in quotation marks, in the sense in which I use the term, does not denote the very complex, shifting, dubiously consistent thoughts of the genius who wrote the dialogues. Instead, it refers to a set of philosophical distinctions, brackets, appearance, reality, matter, mind, made, found, sensible, intellectual, etc. What Dewey called a brood and nest of dualisms. These dualisms dominate the history of Western philosophy and can be traced back to one or another passage in Plato's writings. So yeah, this is like one of the more fundamental claims of Rorty, I'd say, that the dualisms, the dichotomies that dominate Western thought without people realizing it usually are an issue themselves. And binary thinking is not something we must all agree upon, which is like dubiously very often taken as a basic truth by many. Even like I heard like Alex O'Connor say this. So basically, going back to the principle of basically opposites not being able to be true at the same time. The issue is the framing of the question, even that they need to be true or false. Like this framing that everything needs to be true or false, or cannot be judged based on a more granular value. This is like a huge trap of the mind in Western philosophy, and I agree. Yeah, but yeah, it will be elaborated further along the lines. And I've read through like some of the book previously, but I wanted to take it up again and maybe practice my English while doing so. I don't know. Dewey thought, as I do, that the vocabulary which centers around these traditional distinctions has become an obstacle to our social hopes. Much of the material in this volume repeats theses. That's such a bad word. It sounds like shit. Literally. Theses and arguments previously put forward in the 3 volumes of philosophical papers, which I have published with Cambridge University Press. Those volumes consisted of papers written for philosophical journals or for conferences attended mostly by philosophy professors. In this volume, I am reprinting pieces of 2 other sorts. First, lectures intended for a so-called general audience, that is, students and teachers in colleges and universities, as opposed to gatherings of specialists in philosophy. Second, occasional contributions to newspapers and magazines, mostly on political or semi-political topics. Most of these essays contain fewer footnotes than do those included in philosophical papers. I hope that this new collection may interest an audience wider than the one to which those volumes were directed. Section 1 of this volume is a bit of autobiography, explaining how early on I found myself moving away from Plato in the direction of Dewey. Section 2 consists of 3 lectures given in Vienna and Paris in 1993 under the heading Hope in Place of Knowledge. I like how gentle that sounds nowadays. How how actually fragile that sounds. Hope in place of knowledge. Nowadays, that the word hope in any serious topic sounds fragile, but kind of beautiful. Anyway, Hope in Place of Knowledge, originally published in French and German. I thought about expanding and revising them, but have finally decided to publish them in English pretty much as given. They offer a fairly simple, albeit sketchy, outline of my own version of pragmatism. This version makes no pretense of being faithful to the thoughts of either James or Dewey, much less Peirce, whom I barely mention. Rather, it offers my own, sometimes idiosyncratic, restatements of Jamesian and Deweyan themes. My choice of themes and my ways of rephrasing them result from my conviction that James's and Dewey's main accomplishments were negative, in that they explain how to slaw off a lot of intellectual baggage, which we inherited from the Platonic tradition. Negative not in the sense that it's bad. It's just like it's against something. It's contra Platonism. Contra Platonism in a very specific sense. Anyway, each of the 3 essays, therefore, has a title of the form, quotation marks, thought pause, without, thought pause, quotation marks, end. So without. Each of the 3 essays, therefore, has a title of the form without, where the first blank is filled by something we want to keep, and the second, something which James and Dewey enabled us, if not exactly to throw away, at least to understand in a radically un-Platonic way. The title Hope in Place of Knowledge is a way of suggesting that Plato and Aristotle were wrong in thinking that humankind's most distinctive and praiseworthy capacity is to know things as they really are, to penetrate behind appearance to reality. That claim saddles us with the unfortunate appearance-reality distinction, and with metaphysics. A distinction and a discipline which pragmatism shows us how to do without. I want to demote the quest for knowledge from the status of end in itself to that of one more means towards greater human happiness, I want to demote the quest for knowledge from the status of end in itself, so knowledge as end in itself, to that of one more means towards greater human happiness. Weird sentence structure, very weird, but yeah, I get the general idea. So, like, knowledge not as an end in itself, but as a means towards greater human happiness. My candidate for the most distinctive and praiseworthy human capacity is our ability to trust and to cooperate with other people, and in particular to work together so as to improve the future. Under favorable circumstances, our use of this capacity culminates in utopian political projects, such as Plato's ideal state, Christian attempts to realize the kingdom of God here on earth, and Marx's vision of the victory of the proletariat, which very obviously failed by the command of Russia. These projects aim at improving our institutions in such a way that our descendants will be still better able to trust and cooperate, and will be more decent people than we ourselves have managed to be. In our century, the most plausible project of this sort has been the one to which Dewey devoted his political efforts, the creation of a social democracy, that is, a classless, casteless, egalitarian society. I interpret James and Dewey as giving us advice on how, by getting rid of the old dualisms, we can make this project as central to our intellectual lives as it is to our political lives. Yeah. Like, only relevant in Europe as of now, I'd say. Relevant to the whole of humanity, actually, but sadly, with any force in power in Europe, not much elsewhere. Maybe in Japan and South Korea. I don't know. Doubt. Yeah, I mean Australia and New Zealand, etc. Iceland is hugely democratic. Japan might be. In section 3, I embark on some little expeditions out from philosophy into various neighboring areas of culture: jurisprudence, literary criticism, religion, science, and, in a little paper written just for kicks, Heidegger. Not exactly an area of culture, but now the name given, as Auden said of Freud, to a whole climate of opinion. In these pieces, which were inspired by one or another current controversy, I try to show how these areas look when seen through pragmatist eyes. Section 4 is also made up mostly of pieces which take sides in some current debate, but here the debates are explicitly about politics. The 4 pieces in this section discuss our chances of achieving a democratic utopia. For various reasons which these pieces spell out, I think these chances are pretty dim. Realism. But I do not think that is a reason to change our political goal. True! There is no more worthy project at hand. We have nothing better to do with our lives. Yeah, and like actually being disappointed in a worthy project, in worthy morality, in worthy ethics, in worthy goals in life. To be disappointed in that means to forsake a meaning of life, a very central meaning of life, and I'm very sad to see that happening to many people. The cynicism of Trumpism and cynicism of imperialism in Russia. Capitalist Trumpism and imperialist Russia. Imperialist even against its own interests, against the world's interests. It's a very sad ordeal. Anyway. In the concluding section 5, I have included pretty much everything I published about the present socio-political situation in the United States prior to my achieving our country, Harvard University Press, 1998. These pieces are run-ups to that book. By including them, I hope to supplement the more general reflections on contemporary politics, which make up section 4 with discussion of some concrete problems. Because I keep finding myself referred to as a postmodernist relativist, I have begun this volume with an essay called Relativism, Finding and Making, and ended it with an afterword called Pragmatism, Pluralism and Postmodernism, the only previously unpublished piece in the book. I think that relativism and postmodernism are not just postmodernism are words which never had any clear sense, and that both should be dropped from our philosophical vocabulary. A philosophical view which was propounded in detail before the First World War is not happily described as postmodern, even though there is considerable overlap between that view and those held by such post-Nietzschean European thinkers as Heidegger and Derrida. Relativism is as misleading a description of the views of these latter figures as it is of those of James and Dewey. Serious discussion of any of these four philosophers is only possible if one does not assume that lack of an apparent reality distinction entails that every action or belief is as good as every other. So the point is that if you forego this weird distinction, like duality, this binary nature of thinking that Platonism serves. I don't think Platonism created this. I think Platonism is a prime example of this. If you forego that, if you forget about that, then the alternative where you land up is not a relativism that's like being without values, being without truth, or where everything is as good as the other thing. That does not follow. If you delete the structure of there being dualities, you don't end up with everything being just unstructured mess. You can have more than just binaries, and still have a strong structure in your thinking, with a basis in sound thought. Yeah, the descriptions of what sound thought is then is, of course, difficult to achieve a consensus in. But why should you receive a consensus? It seems more true than the very flawed dualism perspective. And I think he'll get there later. I hope that the papers in this volume may help convince people that relativism is a bugbear, and that the real question about the utility of the old Platonic dualisms is whether or not their deployment weakens our sense of human solidarity. I read Dewey as saying that discarding these dualisms will help bring us together by enabling us to realize that trust, social cooperation, and social hope are where our humanity begins and ends. I am grateful to Stefan McGrath, for the suggestion that I collect some of my recent non-technical pieces for this volume, and to Sally Holloway for careful copy editing and many helpful suggestions. I have dedicated this collection to the institution at which its contents were written, the University of Virginia, of which I was Emeritus Professor of the Humanities. By offering me a non-departmental university professorship, a sort of freelance arrangement unique, I believe to U.S. universities Mr. Jefferson's university made it possible for me to teach and write about anything I pleased, when and as I pleased. I am most grateful both to the university itself and to the colleagues and students who made my 15 years in Charlottesville so happy and so productive. Cool. That was the preface. Next we'll get to the actual introduction piece, the introduction piece being, as said earlier, titled Relativism, Finding and Meaning. Relativism, Finding and Making. Yeah. I like this. I might read the next chapter online as well. Yeah. Thanks. Have a nice one.